Okay, my name is Henk van Scherpenzeel, typical Dutch name. Age, yeah, I'm a bit old, 67. And I started in the tree care business, let's say that, in arboriculture, at 1972, November 1972, so almost 50 years already. So that old I am. I started in the city Amsterdam, and after that some private companies, and for community again for half year. And after that, in 1984, I started my own company, a little company, one-man company, together with a companion. And that later on we built it up, and now there are about 30 people working at the company. The company name is Boomtotaalzork. Tree totally care. You can exchange it. And I'm that old, I'm retired already, but I do something like this as well still, yes. And I like it, because there's a lot of things to do anymore, and maybe over 100 years in the future as well. But if I can do something on it to get some benefit of the company, some benefit for the trees and for the arborists who are coming, the new arborists, I like it, yeah.
If you can explain us how the arboriculture is organized in Netherlands.
Earlier years, let's say in the 60s, 70s, last century, we hadn't arborists. Yeah, there are people who had some tree nurseries and all that kind of stuff. Anyhow, we have some gardeners. And there came a guy named Jurgen Kopijn and his brother Ulrich Kopijn. And they started as a tree surgeons. Early years we were tree surgeons, I was as well, but unfortunately for the trees, I'm now an arborist and no tree surgeon anymore. So they started in the 60s like tree surgeons, and they built up the company Kopijn. It's still a company here in the Netherlands. And later on we educate ourselves. And later on the education centers, the green educator centers for gardens, etc., they pick it up. And it's just like a little cloud just swelling up and gets bigger and bigger. And that's one of the finest things we did. We started at the end of the 70s, 79, 80, so about that. We started with a group with 8 people in the Netherlands. Let's say let's make a kind of a club with tree surgeons at that time. And to make the KPB, Kring Praktiserende Boomverzorgers. It's a circle of practicing tree care people. And now in the Netherlands, 1,100 people are members. They're just member at the personal title. And in the late 80s, beginning 90s, the education started at the green certifications at green education centers, and later on certificated like a certified tree worker. And later on it gets the European tree worker, ATW by the EAC, at ATT, etc. Yeah. So it's a quite young part of all the work you can do in let's say in the public areas like green work, etc. But especially the trees, tree care, that's quite young, yes.
And do you have your national certification program as well?
We have now just we had the ETW, of course, mostly all Europe has that, and now we started at the middle group. So that's the people from young guys from 16 till 20. We start now an education line to get really the Dutch certification as a tree worker. Yes. Just starting at, I think next year it will be start, yeah, at 2 or 3 certification spots, yes.
And do you have here many people from abroad working in the industry in Netherlands?
How many people are working in tree care? Some communities had their own tree care teams And there are a lot of more companies like Piers Flores, like the Nationale Bomenbank, like Copijn and Quercus. There are a lot more. So most of those 1100 members of the KPB, Kring Praktiserende Bomensoort, they're working in the tree care. Most of them, not all. But outside there are a lot more people who are working in tree care business. All and on, over 3,000, maybe 5,000. Yeah, that's the direction. Yeah.
And Holland is very well known for nursery business.
Yeah.
So what is the connection between arboriculture and nurseries here?
The only connection are the trees, of course, because if you don't have young trees, you don't get any older trees. The connection, we're just good on speaking terms with each other. Nursery people to raise up trees and to sell them as soon as possible, because that brings some money. But we have some influence on it, because we want to have trees only from good quality, good stem, not too much branches, not too many big and fresh wounds. What like the roots are, root balls, etc. And all these qualities. We don't accept bad trees. When we buy a bunch of trees for a project, for example, let's say platanus, 30 trees, young platan trees, and 2 or 3 or 5 of them are very bad or had some damage, we send them back and we get new ones. Yes, that's really, you have to say, okay, this is what we accept, nothing else. And if you do that, then the nurseries, they're getting just deliver more and better quality, quality better trees. And that's what we like, that have to be.
And is there any synchronization about the technologies of tree planting or tree training in the first years?
Yeah, well, the way to prune trees at the nurseries is just a bit different. You have to prune trees in the nursery, you have to prune them that way that the crowns get not too wide, because they're standing narrow to each other. They wanted to force the increase, let them grow. And when we planted them in the streets or besides the streets, we just prune them for a kind of a mission. What was standing here? Is it 2 meters beside the road or more? Or what do we raise up the other side of the crown? How high and why and how do we do that? So, but our way to prune trees is just different than nursery, because we like in the first 15, 10, 20 years, it's dependent on what tree it is, a poplar or a quercus. We like to prune just in the beginning, just the complete branch and not a bit of it. No, complete, and the bigger one first and the smaller one, leave them for a while, and maybe next year or 2 years later we prune them off. So it's a kind of guided pruning.
If you should summarize the approach to newly planted trees, how is the procedure of pruning trees by the planting?
There are some 2 different lines. There's one line that said, okay, when you get a tree from a nursery, a lot of fine roots they have cut off because you must make a bowl, and lots of fine roots, the outside the fine roots are staying back at the nursery, so you don't get them with you. And there is a disbalance between crown mass and root mass. For a couple of years ago, 15, 20 years ago, don't prune them, leave them, because the tree needs all the leaves they have. Well, that's one thing. But when you get a very hot and dry summer, you give them a lot of water, but there is a disbalance between crown, too much leaves, and roots, too little roots. So, in my opinion, and the most common things now is to, okay, prune the trees, but prune them like they did it one time, like they did it at the nursery. For example, oak trees. When you plant an oak tree, you see all those new fine sprouts on the outside of the crown. Keep them away. And some big branches, well, 1 or 2, that's it. And plant it there, give it a lot of as much as water as needed, and then after 2 years, then you can start to really to start the structural pruning. Just the first time, prune it all around a bit, not too heavy, a bit. It looks what happened, and then you can just go on and on. That's I think the best way to do.
So approximately how much percentage of the foliage you remove by the planting time?
Well, it's about 10 and 20%. That's it. That could be enough. Because when you get a tree from the nursery, every 2 or 3 years they cut off the roots as well, and to start to find the roots as well. And it's just multiple fine roots. That's just fine. So maybe 2 or 3 years before you get a tree, they have been cut off. So don't prune that hard. No, not 50 or 30, 50 or 50%. No. Between 10 and 20%, it would be enough. Yes.
And so the approach of not pruning at all by the planting time is still working here, or do you recommend it?
There are still some companies, they don't prune anything by planting. And it depends of the species. Tilia tomatosa, for example, very long, heavy growing branches. I've seen in the practice, I see a lot of Tilia tomatosas after planting, and they get a type of grow back, and they started from by the tree, they started again. So why don't you help them and cut them a bit in? So maybe not the complete branches, but just reduce the ground mass. Yeah, that's good. Other types, for example, very young poplar trees, you can stick them in the ground and they will grow normally. So it depends on the tree species, yeah, and the circumstance where you plant it in. Is it in a park? There's a lot of shade. That's no problem. And you put them in the street. There's a lot of heat. Sunlight, reflection, etc., etc. Please bring it down and give them a lot of water. Yeah.
Now, Henk, if you should summarize the activities of your company, so what is the basic business you do with trees?
The most common business we do is pruning trees. That's the main thing we do. Pruning trees. We plant and transplant trees as well. We do to optimization of the growing spots with pneumatic systems. We just pneumatic with just air, felling of trees, rigging and felling trees, special cases, tree assistments, all kinds of tree assistments, to get some investigations. Why doesn't grow the tree? It have to. Why doesn't do it? What's the problem? And that's a team of 6-7 people who are doing that. Yes.
When you mention transplanting of trees, is it common practice in Netherlands?
It's quite common. It's quite common because if there is a project, they rebuild the road, and there are some trees, not a very old ones, but for example trees about 15, 30, 35 years old. And the quality is quite good. The circumstances are good. There's no underground infrastructure, and you can pretty easily. You can dig it out and to put it from the first spot to another spot. Why would you transplant it? Because cutting off, that's the last thing you can do, and then you lost a lot of trees. And but if the tree is just miserable, why do you transplant miserable for maybe 10,000 euros, and you don't get what you wanted at the end? So please, that's just thinking what's the cost and what's the benefits. If that is just quite good, okay, do it. Please transplant it. Yeah, why not?
Speaking about the transplanting of trees, do you do it in one step, or do you prepare the trees for the transplanting?
It depends on the size of the trees. For example, Tilia is just well, normally it goes well in one step. But if the tree is bigger, for example, the same size of oak tree, quercus, and the same size, Tilia is no problem. But the oak tree, the quercus, maybe you have to do it in 1 or 3 steps. You have to prepare it, to cut partly the root system off, and just make a compact root ball, kind of a root ball, and after 1 or sometimes 2 years later you can dig it out and bring it to the new spot. Yeah, it depends on the situation in tree species.
And if you imagine the quercus with, say, 40 centimeters of DBH, how big root ball you would normally? Unprepared, at least 1 or 10. If you can do it 1 or 2 years growing seasons later, you can do it 1 at 8, and then you have some time to prepare the root ball. Yeah. Diameter of stem, diameter of the root balls, 1 till 10. Yeah, okay. 1 at 10. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, in Holland there is quite a lot of tree bracing systems and these kinds of ground security systems installed. Can you describe us how the history was here? And
GVUS, Cobra we have, and there are a lot of self-made constructions as well. Well, in Holland we don't use that much bracing systems because first of all we try to solve the problem with pruning, with good pruning, and if that really isn't impossible, just for in case of, we just make a line in it, make a bracing system. So it's not, it's maybe a V-fork, well it is a V-fork or it isn't. This is not a V-fork, this is one. So that's different. And even when it's a V-fork, well when it's connected very good, leave it and prune it just on the outside and at the periphery of the part of the branch. When the weight here is just lower, it won't break that much or that easy. But if we have, or for example, for a building under the tree, and the insurance, well, that's a high risk. We don't give you any insurance anymore. We make a bracing system in the tree. Yeah, but first of all, let's try to prune it. If not, okay, then we can use. Yeah.
And do you use supports here, the props, or some?
Well, in the early years when we were tree searching, we use a lot of props in hollow trees and. But we have a guy, we will see it later on this week, Frits Gielissen. He makes a lot of props. You just insulate props in trees, even in hollow trees, and you just remove the bracing system because it's no need anymore. And it functions well. Pruning, props, and to get out the old system. Yeah.
You know, you were part of the European Agricultural Standard Project, so how would you describe the influence of this discussion to Netherlands industry or to your practice?
Well, the most important thing, in my opinion, and that's why I'm just participating in it, is let's talk about all the same things. If we call this A and that B and C, okay, it's A, B and C in Spain or in Litouwen or in France or in the Czech Republic or in the Netherlands. Let's understand each other. And if you, in your work, you have to say, okay, this is the standard, but we just do it a little bit different, it's yours. You have to, I think you have to have some good reason to do it different. There are always things, so the standard, it's not if you don't do it, you're wrong. No, it's the standard. And there are always some things around the standards. And that's for me the most important thing. And it brings you a lot of things. We can discuss it with each other, with a group of 14 people. We discuss all kinds of things. Hey, that's a clever idea. Hey, and so it's like the KPB. We started in the Netherlands, late 70s. Now we started in Europe. Let's talk about our business. How do you do it? Okay, well, that's clever. Or it's better to call it this way. Hey, let's make a standard. And I like it because we understand each other much and much better. So a guy from the Czech Republic can work also in the Netherlands and the other way around. We can exchange employees to work with each other. I like it.
You know, if you should say in Netherlands there is quite a lot of certified European arborists.
Yeah.
Do you think that the standards will be the source of the know-how for testing people soon, or do you feel it as a process?
It is a process, not here's the standard and now the next year we start it. No. We bring it to all those education centers and say, okay, this is the standard. This is what we do all in Europe, and now you give it the Dutch idea of it or the German idea, but this is the standard. Please use it. And as far as I know, all the education centers, they ask me sometimes, when do we get a standard? So they like to work with it. All those new diseases and pests, like the dead branch from ash trees, like the Aeschylus. Aeschylus don't belong here to the Netherlands for years ago. Maybe the oldest one was 400 years, or maybe 400 or 500 years ago. It started here with Aeschylus. They bring it from behind the east from the Balkan, Czech Republic, Romania, etc. Because they're very hot summers, above 40 degrees centigrade. Yeah, and this bacterial, it died by 40 degrees centigrade. So if you had one day 40 degrees and the wood get 40 degrees, okay, it functions still, but the bacterial gets off. In the Netherlands, we don't have them. So it's quite swammy underground, most of the Netherlands. They will grow very fast here, as Aeschylus. They made one special Aeschylus baumani. It's a kind of a clone of each other. So there's one kind of illness in that clone. So if the first one started, you all get it, because it's all the same, almost the same DNA structure. So it's the same with ash. We had a lot of types of ash trees. Yeah, they have almost the same DNA structure, and they come a little. The dieback from ash. It started in the leaves, and they fall off. And when you clean it, not every time, because it's also food for the underground. When you clean it, maybe you take a lot of that spores from the fungi away. And now we had also, we saw in Italy the platanus cancer. There's a lot of new diseases coming, maybe because the climate is changing. It's getting more and more warm, and maybe it's just enough to give those diseases more chance to survive and to make some victims and more. And when they get more victims, they get more food and they spread wider, and the snowball effect, it gets bigger and bigger. I'm not happy with it, but